Speedway Report is produced and broadcast by the Zeus Radio Network for Racers Reunion Radio. Well, Formula One wrapped up their season in Abu Dhabi. Asphalt Modifieds ran one of their iconic races, the 45th Annual Turkey Derby. Southern Late Models welcomed some warm autumn weather here in North Carolina. All this and more coming up. Welcome to Speedway Report. Monday, November 26, 2018, from the shores of Lake Norman in Race City, USA, Mooresville, North Carolina. I'm Patrick Reynolds, and thank you for joining us here, the fastest half hour in racing. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. One of the many topics we can toss out and put in the comments if you are watching us live on Facebook. Also to point out, big note, big day for me. I kind of throw this out there every year. You know, you guys know I tease Christmas about once a month all year long. Today we get to tease the Indianapolis 500. The math may vary a little bit, but right now we are halfway. The crossed flags are in the air to the running of the Indy 500. I got it as May 26, 2019, with November 26, 2018 right here. We've got 6 months until the green flies. It's the greatest spectacle in racing. So it's something you want to harp on me about Christmas, fine. Let's talk about the Indy 500. But let's really talk about what happened over the weekend. We've got a lot of stuff to kick around with the Speedway Report Victory Lane Lap. Hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for the FIA scheduling of Formula One race again over Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States. Not a worldwide holiday here, one for the America. And I love it that we get to tune into Abu Dhabi on a Sunday morning. Not much into football. Doesn't float my boat like it does so many people, with especially with Thanksgiving. It's kind of traditional. But for me, if it's got an engine in it and goes fast, I'm all in. Lewis Hamilton won from the pole. Good race yesterday, if you tuned in early yesterday morning, out in the Middle East. Last few years, Brazil has taken the Thanksgiving weekend role, but this year we got back to the United Emirates. Hamilton on the pole, no real surprise. We'll talk a little bit more about the strategy that went into that event. USAC Midgets were in action last Thursday as well. Huge event, one of the biggest short track races of the entire year. Turkey Night Grand Prix out in Ventura, California. Christopher Bell won it for the third time in his career and the second time in a row that he won that one. Not a golden driller like the Chili Bowl, but still a huge win on his resume. We talked about, this came up recently, just about how much the dirt track racing means to some folks versus the NASCAR events. As Christopher Bell makes his way into the Xfinity Series, will be running there full-time again in 2019, but what will happen to him during the year as he gears up for 2020? There's no way he's going to run the Xfinity car again in 2020. He will be in Cup, and recently remarked how important the dirt racing is to him and how big it was and how much I get that. Turkey Night Grand Prix, yeah, if you take the money out of it and just look at what's the racing aspect of it, heck yeah. Turkey Night, to me, he talked about how important the Chili Bowl was compared to the NASCAR playoffs. I'll put Turkey Night up there as well. The 98 lapper that they have in California for the midgets. Darn right. That's just me as well, but congratulations to Christopher Bell as he goes 2 for 2 the last couple of years there. The Pavement Modifieds, my guys that I grew up on, held the Turkey Derby up in Wall, New Jersey. Dave Sapienza took the lead after two favorites, Matt Hirschman and Jimmy Blewett, tangled and sent them around. 150 laps. I think there were roughly 30 or so remaining when Hirschman and Blewett got together. We'll touch on that in a little bit too. But here closer to home, the Thanksgiving Classic was held out in Kenly, North Carolina at the Southern National Speedway. The late model stock cars went 200 times around the 0.4 of a mile. Matt McCall passed Deke McCaskill with just over 2 laps to go for the win. McCall went around early in the race. They had a halfway break. He was able to, well, wanted to save his equipment, really couldn't. Had to get on the throttle, put on a charge early, so that was pretty good for the fans. McCall, full-time crew chief in the Cup Series for Chip Ganassi Racing, sits in victory lane with his late model stock car at the Thanksgiving Classic at Kenley. So 1 week ago, we were discussing Joey Logano's championship, and I dissected the NASCAR playoffs. As usual, I beat playoffs and auto racing up pretty hard and how NASCAR systems are, but let's move forward from that. One of the most popular questions I got this week in person, texting, social media, all kinds of communications is, hey, what are you going to talk about now during the off season? What's there to talk about? Well, I put some thought into it and how little the off season actually is and is almost non-existent. I'm a racer, so I don't go with necessarily the Cup version of a racing season. A lot of people use that as a synonym for racing, is the Monster Energy Cup Series. I do not, and try to really spread my wings outside of that, even though I grew up on the old Winston Cup Grand National stock cars. Love them to death. But a lot of other forms grab my interest. I follow them. A lot of exciting stuff trips my trigger, like Thanksgiving weekend. So many of my people I know were all up into football and the pigskin. Not me. I enjoyed the Grand Prix at Abu Dhabi. Served it, drank my coffee, watched the Formula One race while the family sat around and we chatted here in the house about different stuff. Made a few appearances, but yeah, just kind of chilled on the couch for about an hour and a half and was able to catch a lot of the race. So if you think about that, Cup season gets over, checkered flag waves in Miami. Okay, we're done. They had Thanksgiving weekend off, and they'll have the banquet in Las Vegas later this week. Fine. Really, the on-track stuff. There is extremely little downtime for a show like mine, where we are the reincarnated version of a Motor Week Illustrated or a Wind Tunnel, and we really throw the darts at the board and try to hit all forms of motorsports. I was thinking about it. I was like, what are we going to talk about? Technically, for motorsports, this is an off-season with so many series and tracks that are off, but there's very little that I can't find each and every weekend. So much that I decided to take note. This past weekend, we talked about it, the Victory Lane Lap. We got lots of racing over Thanksgiving weekend, the traditional one at Wall. Formula One and sliding a race in there, Turkey Night Grand Prix, we get all that. This coming week is a huge one in the world of pavement late models, is that the whole world converges on Pensacola, Florida for the Snowball Derby. Now, this remains a bucket list for me again, as I have a commitment closer here to Charlotte, North Carolina this weekend, so I won't be going down to the Derby, but there's always 2019, right? This is a huge weekend for the pavement late models. This is also the weekend where the newly established event, was it 2 years ago, something like that? The Gateway Dirt Nationals for the dirt late models are held in St. Louis. This has been an extremely successful event since they started it. Indoor racing, dirt late models, very tight, very small track, but it is gaining a tremendous amount of steam. That's coming up this week as we click off the end of November and dive into December. Week after that is the PRI show up in Indianapolis. Fantastic event. It is, as far as trade shows go in the world of motorsports, I think it's the one. It is the auto racing trade show. If you're going to go to one off-season show, this is the one you need to go to. I know this is cliche to say that. This is the one you're going to go to. I'm not trying to book a movie for you guys, but PRI is the one. That's the following week. Now, there's another week, and then there's Christmas week, so I don't know if I can pick up something for Christmas weekend. But I know I want to say 2 to 3 years ago, we did, if you took Christmas out of the equation, we went through a calendar year twice. We had well over 100 straight weeks where on this show, we could give you a result from somewhere. Some racetrack somewhere had an event, and we were able to give you a little story on the race and whatever happened. So if we look at Snowball Derby and the Gateway Dirt Nationals, I don't know about the week prior to Christmas. Still digging into that. I bet I can find something somewhere. And Christmas isn't going to count. I won't do that Christmas weekend. That's fair enough to say, hey, there won't be any Christmas. And Christmas Eve does fall on a Monday this year, so we won't have a show anyway. We're good. New Year's Eve comes along, and there's a lot of enduros. You know the ones I'm talking about. There's Ransomville, New York. They've always had an enduro classic. Sandusky, Ohio, has one of the biggest enduros with 3 different classes. But these are run, for the most part, weather doesn't get in the way. They if there's snow, they plow the track. If it's not literally raining and icing, for the most part, these events are run. And I can tell you, in Ohio, on January 1st, it's kind of rough, and even rougher if you're up in Ransomville, New York. That's tougher than the Midwest or some New England stuff that I know about. You get clear of that, and then we're just rolling, folks. We are just rolling. The following week after New Year's, which is the traditional Ice Bowl at Talladega, for hundreds of cars. The dirt late models are the featured class. But if you're familiar with the World Series up in Thompson, Connecticut each October, think of something similar to that at the Ice Bowl at the Talladega Short Track, which is across the street from the Super Speedway. They start practicing on Thursday and have qualifying races and features. It's Friday and Saturday and Sunday afternoon. It's a really big deal. And the Red Eye 100 pops up as well. Not as big an event as the Snowball Derby by any means, but that kicks off New Smyrna Speedway. No, not New Smyrna Speedweeks, but New Smyrna Speedway's season for 2019. Just rolling as we get going in January. And a test also in Florida, which has become a big event on their calendar for IMSA, is the Roar Before the 24. This has become an event on its own, almost as big as some race weekends, of how big a deal the Roar is in this test, as people really haven't been together since October, and they're gathering again, and a lot of the teams, a lot of the fans even, I know, are making trips. I know some of my friends on social media and whatnot that are worldwide over in Europe and in other countries will be making a trip to the United States just for the test, just for the Roar Before the 24. So if you're coming, from, say, Europe to America just for a test, that's got to be a big deal. And speaking of big deals, we talked about it a little earlier. We go past that weekend for the Ice Bowl, the Red Eye 100, and the IMSA test at Daytona. Get into the Chili Bowl, for crying out loud. You want to talk about big events? I talked about the World Series and the Ice Bowl. Forget it. The Chili Bowl is huge. They got an A-main on Saturday night that we got to start qualifying for on Tuesday night. This is a big event with a load-in that's a week ahead of time. And this is the event that Christopher Bell talked about was such a big deal, bigger than the NASCAR playoffs to them. You follow that up with the actual Rolex 24. Early February, you get into the short tracks and speed weeks, essentially. NHRA will kick off their year a couple weeks before the Daytona 500, and you're into February Daytona Super Speedway racing shortly thereafter. In a breakdown from now until, let's say, the Daytona 500, let's satisfy those folks that think the season goes just, Miami to Daytona, and Cup is their year. What are you going to talk about during the off season? Well, there's plenty. Other than Christmas, I'm going to have a hard time finding a race not to talk about. And yeah, I don't think our audience will be that big a deal on Christmas Eve, December 24th, if we go live. So we maybe take that night off. I believe I'm a dedicated racer, but I may not be on the air that night. But all this stuff, if you stay away from Cup, there's so much to do. I haven't talked about if these guys go testing anywhere or if there's a Goodyear test, anything like that. Just the short tracks and other forms of motorsports, the indoor stuff, gosh, what are you going to talk about during this off season? Other than Christmas, there really isn't one. And I kind of like it that way. On this end of the deal, when I'm not turning a wrench and working 14-hour days to build race cars and I just get to write about them and talk about them, yeah, you could race 52 weeks a year, and I am happy with that. Now, I talked about the Formula One race in Abu Dhabi yesterday because racing's my thing. I don't do football. But I loved it. I'm going to give thanks again. Thank you, the FIA, for scheduling a Formula One race, the season finale, over Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States. What a tire strategy race. I get it. It was the typical result. We had a Mercedes on top of the podium, Ferrari second, Red Bull third. But the tire strategy and what you should do really came into play as to what lap you should pit on if you wanted to do a one-stop race or two. Hamilton went with the super softs and a very early pit stop about 8 to 10 laps into the race, and then went the distance to the checkered flag. And a lot of teams were concerned. The super softs, the ultra softs, the hyper softs. The track went from daytime in the desert to nighttime. It was extremely hot into the 90-degree range, and the sun, before the sun dipped past the horizon. You see that in NASCAR racing here all the time with daytime practice and qualifying. Then we go race at night, and you've got a handful of a race car, as well as the threat of rain through this entire event. We started, it was clear skies. The clouds moved in as the sun set. You could see on the radar this massive cloud of rain moving in. It did rain for a little bit, and I'm surprised as you guys that in the desert we had this threat of rain, but we did. And it was kind of cool to watch the strategies play out with the tires, the daylight to nighttime swap, as well as the rain. The result was the same as we've always been because the cream rises to the top. But I thought Formula One presented some interesting storylines in their season finale. I loved seeing the fact that Lewis Hamilton locked this thing up a couple of races ago. I felt like I saw a legitimate race championship be held, not a phony, exciting four-way tie circus. I'll keep beating this dead horse. I'm embracing it. I'm going to do it. Now, did any of you catch what happened at the Abu Dhabi circuit today? Yeah, something else happened there today. It was pretty cool. Fernando Alonso and Jimmy Johnson swapped rides. There was a big Lowe's Chevrolet in the garage area at Abu Dhabi, and there was an outdated McLaren from 2013 that Jimmy got into. They did a ride swap with Alonso's race yesterday in Abu Dhabi, possibly being his final Formula One race of his career. At least he won't race in F1 in 2019 full-time. We know that because he's coming here to Indianapolis for the 500 in May, and he's going to look at other options as far as sports car racing and some other options as far as what to do full-time. 2020, maybe he'll be in something full-time, and he thought maybe he'll go back to Formula One. Maybe he'll come to IndyCar, and doesn't this open up the conversation for NASCAR, which this ride swap with Jimmy Johnson? Sure, it's a publicity stunt, but oh my goodness, I would love to see Fernando come over here. I know it would take money, and I know he's got it. He's got the connections, but I'd love to see him come over here and give NASCAR a whirl. Doesn't even have to be full-time, but wouldn't you just love the sparkle and the excitement he would add to the Daytona 500 if it would happen? I'm crossing my fingers that it does, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing him in May at the Brickyard for the 500. Looking at modifieds yesterday in the Turkey Derby, there was the two favorites, a big money Matt Hirschman and hometown favorite Jimmy Blewett, pretty much dominated the action at Wall Stadium before they tangled, spun out, and Dave Sapienza took the 150-lap feature. But it just didn't surprise me with the amount of times that Hirschman and Blewett went to the front, stay there. And it reminds me a little bit of some of the rivalries we see when a guy is often behind. Sometimes there isn't a whole lot of controversy when Blewett is in front, but we've seen some stuff where Blewett is not afraid to put that bumper in there. And, if the radiator cap fits, the whole car will fit. I've heard that expression when I was a little kid. And there's a spot where there's going to be controversy because Blewett's going for the win, and that front bumper will be used. And here we were at Turkey Derby again, Blewett in second, not leading the race. And that's what happened. Hirschman was obviously disappointed, but he said it was pretty much expected of Blewett. Don't know if anything really happened after the race, but wasn't wrecked race cars. It was two guys that tangled, spun, had to go to the back, and could not get back to the front. Let's talk about separations and divorces. Got a little bit going on. Chris Windom and the Baldwin brothers will not be back together in 2019 in the USAC Sprint team. In Dirt Late Models Best Performance Motorsports, and Josh Richards have called the splits. Tyler Erb will be taking over for best performance in the #1 dirt late model, which Richards drove to the 2017 Lucas Oil Dirt Late Model Championship, and he was runner-up in 2018. You got to wonder what's a guy got to do nowadays to keep his ride, but I'm sure there was a whole lot underneath the underlying circumstances. Likely, I'm thinking Richards may want to come back to the Rule of Outlaws tour. That's just a hunch to me. We'll see. Tommy Baldwin Racing, not breaking up with anybody. They're getting back together. They will have a Cup entry in the 2019 Daytona 500, as well as other events. Looking to have Tommy back. I used to like watching his old man race when I was a kid up in New England. Tommy Baldwin was one of the huge stars in Long Island modified racing. When he would come up to New England, everybody knew who he was, and he was one of the top guys from the island to come up. As New England fans, we used to love it when the guys came out from the island for the big events. That was great. So TBR, Tommy Jr., going to resurrect the team. They went out of business 2016, 2017. Started it in 2009 during the recession. Tough time to get involved in NASCAR. But he got a slew of drivers and fought and clawed all the way that he could to try to make that team survive. And as we get out of here tonight, some news to pass on. Tough commentary to follow, if at all. I'll just read it. I'll read what I have. Former NASCAR Camping World Truck Series winner Rick Crawford has been sentenced to 130 months in federal prison after being convicted of attempted enticement of a minor to engage in sexual activity. 60-year-old Crawford, who was arrested in March, remember we covered that story here, and convicted of the crime in August, was sentenced earlier today in the United States District Court in Orlando. Addition to his time at jail, Crawford has been fined $5,000 and will also be required to register as a sex offender. Sad. Does not even begin to describe that story. Crawford was so well known in the short tracks around the Southeast before his truck days and the late model days, the all-pro days, as well as a racetrack operator in the later years after he got out of the truck series. Yeah, I read the report. Sad. That's all I got to say about that. But yeah, I'm wishing everybody well. Awful story, but we'll close on that one tonight. I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving weekend in between our broadcasts. Keep up on the sport with SpeedwayReport.com. We've got this show's and our past ones uploaded on the site. We've also got a bunch of racing articles to read. In the works right now, spent a little time watching Brett Hearn at the dirt track in Charlotte earlier this month. Got me thinking. It got me thinking. I'll let you know when that story is posted. And our past episodes are on Facebook on Racers Reunion, and at this page, Speedway Report with Patrick Reynolds, on my Twitter pages at Speedway Pat and at Speedway Report, and on racersreunion.com in the forum. You can also catch stuff on Google+, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thank you to all for joining us on the Facebook Live feed for the conversation during the show tonight. And I want to thank all of the military, past and present, for the freedoms we enjoy as Americans in our daily life, including the simple things like bench racing right here on a Monday night. Freedom is not free, and a veteran paid that bill for us. To all of the men and women who are defending freedom and watching Speedway Report, take care of yourselves and come home soon. A special salute to the teachers, school staff, firefighters, police officers, and paramedics in our own communities. They are quiet and modest heroes every single day. God bless. And thank you, because that is certainly something to give thanks for. It is all the men and women in uniform. You've been watching Speedway Report from the shores of Lake Norman in Race City, USA, Mooresville, North Carolina. Please like our Facebook page, Speedway Report with Patrick Reynolds, and follow me on Twitter at SpeedwayPat. On the Drag Racing List Facebook page next is Racing and Rockin' with DragonList.com. Barb, John, and Bill Pratt. Who else was on there? And they'll have some drag racing talk and some real cool music coming up next on Facebook on the Drag Racing List page. We will be back here. We'll be back live on Facebook in 1 week. It will be Monday, December the 3rd, We'll look at the Gateway Dirt Nationals. We will look at the Snowball Derby and a whole lot more. As I told you earlier in the show, there's always a lot going on. Hey, thanks for joining us, and I will see you all next time.